Hey everybody, Rock Guy here with 9 great albums of 2020. 2020, probably the most tumultuous year since 2016. Yeah, pretty much everything that could go wrong this year did. And you know what's neat is this was a pretty universal thing, at least amongst the common man. So I guess if there's any silver lining to 2020 is there was a pretty unanimous solidarity with people amongst each other because of the mess it was. I did find myself identifying with a lot of people I honestly never thought I'd be able to relate to in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, it just seems that that's the way things went because aside from, the things going wrong with the world, there was a lot of personal issues I had to overcome as well. Things related to relationship, disagreements with family over politics, job prospects falling through, money. It was just a pretty crazy year. I believe it was Scott Stapp who said that playing music is the promise of an unknown future. And I really do think this year encapsulates that phrase because with all the craziness and insanity that occurred, there were plenty of great albums to listen to and check out. I really do think these albums captured the best of the year and in many ways demonstrate how integral music is to humanity. Because amidst everything going wrong, these records gave us something to look forward to, something to enjoy, something to reflect on. Whether that be because these records were exploring darker topics that were able to be connected to the mess of that was occurring throughout the year, or because these records were very somber and reflective, capturing tones that a lot of people may not have been able to vocalize on their own. So that was demonstrated by these musicians portraying that. Anyway, I would like to recognize these 9 albums. These 9 albums are very important. They were very important to me, and I think they might be very important to you depending on what type of music you're into, or based on what experiences you had in 2020. So without further ado, here are 9 great albums of 2020. So really, the numerical position some of these albums got isn't very relevant. I do stress that the number 1 album is there, and it's there for a reason. And I do want to emphasize, and we'll get there too when we get to this number, but albums 2 through 4 are also pretty significant. So as of now, make a mental asterisk as to those records once we start to talk about them. I really think you'd be missing out by ignoring any of these albums. They're all pretty important. They're all pretty unique, and they all have something to say. And I think a lot of these albums were pretty overlooked because there was a lot of great music that came out in 2020, so it was very easy to be overshadowed this year. And without further ado, let's kick our list off with number 9. That is Grimes with Miss Anthropocene. So Grimes has largely been just a name to me for a good portion of the past decade. I'd say my first exposure to her came when I was a senior in high school, so this is a little bit less than 10 years ago. And she was pretty popular amongst the hipsters in my class. I was close with the hipsters. But I never heard any of her music. And I would go all those years without hearing her music until 2016 when I heard, I think, her biggest single, which is Flesh Without Blood. And I liked it. It was a very good alternative song. And I enjoyed it for an alternative song, but it wasn't really something that inspired me to keep listening to her, to delve into her discography. About a couple years later, I'd get exposed to her again with her Poppy collaboration on the song Play Destroy, which was also really cool. But again, I was looking into that more so as a Poppy fan than a Grimes fan. Everything pretty much changed in 2019 when My Name Is Dark came out. And that's probably one of the coolest rock songs I've heard in recent memory. One of the comments on the video for My Name Is Dark described it as Nine Inch Nails meets Madonna. And that really does capture that specific song, as well as a lot of the songs on Miss Anthropocene, despite the material herein existing from 2015. I would keep up with the remaining singles that would be released leading up to the album, but, I had no idea what I was going into, really, because Grimes was sort of a non-factor for most of my musical life. And I'm really happy I bought this record. This is a good example of me expanding my horizons in a way that I didn't when I was a teenager and taking new risks, seeing what could possibly inspire me now as an adult. Especially since, it's in my name, Rock Guy. Rock isn't the most innovative genre in recent memory, so I am trying to incorporate more alternative records and maybe other records from other genres. As for Miss Anthropocene, I'd say it's unique in how dark this record is. In regards to what I said in my introduction about some of the albums in 2020 coming out, reflecting the events that occurred throughout the year, this is definitely one of those albums. It really does come off as an accessory to like a Blade Runner movie. There's that cyberpunk theme that's prevalent throughout the record. And a lot of these sounds, they naturally invoke mental imagery. One of the best examples would be 4 a.m. That song to me is basically heavy rain in a concrete city, especially with its introduction. And this is definitely well into the deep night, like past midnight. 4 a.m., obviously. That's just one of the highlights of the album. It's definitely one of my favorite songs. My Name is Dark is another one I mentioned, a very ominous and disturbing nu metal track, which sounds much edgier than, a lot of music released by veteran rockers in 2020. We Appreciate Power is another great example, probably being the heaviest song on the album. It's technically a bonus track, but I still think you should check it out nonetheless. Darkseed in particular is also very good. And it's also particularly unique to me as a listener because I've never really heard something like that in a song before. So what Darkseed is it's basically Grimes giving this ominous, foreboding spoken word poetry amidst Mandarin rapping, which is just fascinating. I thought it was one of the most intense songs on the album and one of the most unique ones as well. Overall, the theme of darkness and humanity evolving into more machine-like, android-esque creatures is pretty much consistent throughout the record. I think especially if you really enjoy alternative music, electronic in particular, and you're looking for something a little bit darker, then this could be the record for you. It's just a very intense and badass record, and check it out. So Grey Daze, for those of you who might be unaware, is the band Chester Bennington was in before he got into Linkin Park. It's particularly unique from Linkin Park in that Grey Daze is predominantly a grunge band, emulating sounds established by artists such as Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and of course Stone Temple Pilots. So I know in 2017, before his untimely passing, his tragic passing, Chester Bennington was planning on revisiting Grey Daze. It was something he wanted to do just as an accessory to Linkin Park. Of course, Linkin Park was always his priority. I'm not entirely sure if he wanted Grey Daze to be a one-off thing where he'd re-record the songs he made in the 90s, or if they were actually going to make new material, which of course could never come into fruition because of his tragic death. And in spite of that, I think the music on this record does a much better job at honoring Chester Bennington's legacy than a lot of the work he did in Linkin Park. At least for me personally, to say that I was disappointed with Chester's output in the 2010s would be an understatement. To be honest with you, I think leading up to his passing, a lot of the side projects Chester was involved in would have been much better than something like One More Light or Living Things. Of course, his brief stint in Stone Temple Pilots, which produced a very solid EP, one of my favorites of that decade. His collaboration with Mark Morton was another one. And of course, Grey Daze. So while I'm technically cheating by including Amends on this list, being that it's a remix album and only half new, seeing as the band members had reused Chester's 90s vocals and just put them over new music because, of course, he wasn't here to re-record it. I still think it deserves recognition nonetheless. It is a unique album in that it abandons a lot of the grunge aspects of Grey Daze's sound in favor of a more slicker, shiny production. Honestly, as a remix album, I don't think I'd be wrong when I say Amends is basically the Linkin Park remix of Grey Daze, because seeing as the majority of this album is heavily inspired by electronic music and feels as though it could have come off as something released in the early 2000s, it really does feel like the Linkin Park album we never got. And as a fan of Chester Bennington and as a fan of early Linkin Park, I do think this album gives much better closure to his passing than One More Light did. I'm not gonna lie, there is some degree of exploitation that feels ever present in this record. There's like maybe 5 versions of the vinyl, which is completely uncalled for and very unnecessary. And I think at the time of this video, Grey Daze made an acoustic EP using Chester's old vocals. So as for what's next, like an a cappella album? That's a joke my editor made. In spite of that, I really do think this album honors Chester Bennington. I can't really speak for any of the things the band is going to do after this, but this specific record is very good, especially if you really like nu metals of the early 2000s, or if you're one of those people that couldn't quite keep up with Linkin Park with their output post Minutes to Midnight. I recommend this record, and I think you'd be missing out as a rock fan by not checking it out, so check it out. And at our number 7 spot, we've got My Morning Jacket with the Waterfall 2. I'm also kind of cheating by including this record as well, seeing as that it's not very new. This material was recorded either in 2015 or 2014. It's a product of the Waterfall sessions of the album released in 2015. I believe the lead singer said he didn't want to make it a double album so as not to overwhelm his fans. But upon revisiting this material, he realized how relevant it was to the year, and he put it out anyway, and I'm very happy he did. So My Morning Jacket is a band I've been casually following for many years now. My first exposure to them, like many middle schoolers, was through American Dad. I saw their American Dad episode, and I liked a good portion of the music I heard there. Up until this record, I've never really been able to get into a full album by them. I like songs here and there. It's not like I've disliked any of them. For whatever reason, this record really hit for me. I also rediscovered my love of Breaking Bad and my new love of Better Call Saul this year. And a lot of the music on this record sounds like it could be a soundtrack to the respective shows. There's this very lovely California vibe to a lot of these rock songs. I think one of the best examples would probably be Climbing Up the Ladder, or Climbing the Ladder if I'm mispronouncing it. The intro actually reminds me of a title cover to like a SpongeBob episode. Yet the rest of the song is very laid back and it's energetic, but it has this groove that I can only equate with watching a sunset on a beach. Feel You is another great song that encapsulates those same themes I mentioned. But what might be the best song on the album is definitely Magic Bullet. All personal politics aside, I think this song is very interesting from an artistic perspective because the lead singer said that Magic Bullet was written in 2015 in regards to the most recent mass shooting of that year. He said at the time of re-releasing Magic Bullet, he doesn't even remember what shooting that was. I think as an artist, that's very powerful that he's still willing to stand by that message, and that his message has only gotten more relevant with each subsequent year. Again, this isn't necessarily a political statement. I just think it's neat. It's very fascinating how his real world experiences are getting more relevant with each passing year. And while it isn't technically new, I do think with how fresh the material is, it's very applicable to 2020. And it's fresh enough to where it could give their following album very unique identity in that it's not necessarily picking up where it left off in 2015, but more so 2020. There's a certain duality to this record, if that's really pretty much sums up what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I know this record wasn't very talked about. It was largely ignored, unfortunately. I wish more people acknowledged it, so if you haven't heard it yet, check it out. Another overlooked album is our number 6 spot, and that's Bush with The Kingdom. If I could sum up this record in one sentence, it would be, this should have been Bush's comeback album. The Kingdom is really the closest Bush has come to matching something in terms of quality from their heyday in the 90s. As a Bush fan, my love for the band has fluctuated since their comeback. I liked maybe a little bit less than half of The Sea of Memories. The same for Man on the Run. But I think Bush hit a personal low in 2017. Black and White Rainbows has got to be one of my least favorite rock albums by any artist ever. I thought it was very hollow. It was very uninspired. It was very cheesy. It was pretty much everything I never expected from a band like Bush. I don't even know who that record was made for. And oddly enough, that record was released on the cusp of his divorce from Gwen Stefani. So you'd think it would have been much more intense and aggravating and powerful. But it wasn't. It was just kind of like, for lack of a better term, wuss rock. So with The Kingdom, I think he really rediscovered his passion for his genre of music and the type of music that made him, Gavin Rossdale, such an icon, such a relevant piece of the 90s. Because the majority of this album is very aggressive and hard-hitting. And it might even be my favorite Bush album, seeing as prior to this record coming out, Bush has never really been a band that I've been able to get into completely. I like some songs here and there off specific albums. Of course, 16 Stone would probably be the best example of an album with the majority of songs I do enjoy. But yeah, I really love Man on the Run. I do think The Kingdom, Bullet Holes, Ghost in the Machine, and Blood River are probably my favorite songs. Flowers on a Grave is definitely the best song. That sounds like something that could have come directly off their 90s output. Overall, it's a very good record. It's a very inspired record. And I think it's a very unfortunate record because had this come out in 2011, when rock music had more of a greater standing in popular culture, it could have really boosted Bush's relevancy. I think it would have given them a better rubric to build their comeback off of than the Sea of Memories did. I think if I had any complaint about this record, it would definitely be the song Undone. And it's not even that it's a bad song, it's just that it does feel out of place on the record. I guess it's their attempt at doing another Glycerine. Seeing as the majority of this record is hard rock and pure aggression and viciousness, at least as much as Bush can accomplish, it does kind of come off as a square peg. But regardless, it's a very good album. It's a very important album for rock music, at least, and I think you should check it out. It's definitely something you might be missing out on if you love, anything from the 90s. And at our number 5 spot, we have Five Finger Death Punch with F8. And yes, I did say Five Finger Death Punch for this spot because the number 5 is in their name. But regardless, I do think this is actually a very solid album. My feelings for Five Finger Death Punch are the same as Bush, in that prior to this record, there wasn't ever really something I enjoyed from beginning to end by the band. Pretty much my enjoyment of Five Finger Death Punch would fluctuate, with me liking a little bit less than half the songs on one album, their prior album being a good example of this, or with me barely liking a single song on the album, Got Your Six being a great example of this. I've been keeping up with the band since The Wrong Side of Heaven and The Righteous Side of Hell. I still haven't listened to their first 3 records, but as someone who's been following them since then, I do think they're a very unique band. I don't want to say they're a very underrated band because they absolutely are not, but I do think they have a lot more going for them than people give them credit for, and maybe that's just a consequence of being mainstream. At this point, I would say Five Finger Death Punch is on the level of a band like Imagine Dragons or Nickelback, where their fame is actively working against them, at least in terms of winning over their critics. But overall, this is a very good record. It's definitely their most artistic record out of the ones I've mentioned that I've been following. It really does come off like the band has a true vision and direction that they were going for here and elaborating on it. Of course, a lot of this might be due to the lineup changes. Jeremy Spencer is no longer in this band, replaced by Charlie Engine, who, from what I can see, maintains a little bit more professionalism than Jeremy does. Another great example is just the opening track, F8, I believe it's called, is a nice instrumental orchestral intro. Something that I don't think Five Finger Death Punch has really done before in the time I've been listening to them. Hearing a little bit off before it became a big single is pretty cool too. And I do give the band credit for not releasing that as the debut single, especially since that's the most catchy song on the album and the most accessible one. Living the Dream, Inside Out, and Full Circle are also very good rock tracks. The worst song on the album is TikTok, for obvious reasons. But that aside, I think this is a very good record, and I give Five Finger Death Punch a lot of credit for showing off their artistic prowess a little more. I should probably address this before someone in the comments beats me to it. But in regards to that stupid video for Living the Dream, I really have nothing to say about Five Finger Death Punch in regards to their politics. If you want to know how Zoltan Bathory feels about the events of 2020, then just go look up Zoltan Bathory's statement in regards to that video. Considering that Five Finger Death Punch themselves stated that F8 was not a political record, or Fate, I'm going to call it F8, it's way better than Fate. But since they stated that this was not a political record, I don't know what would possess them to make such a stupid video. And that kind of plays into a lot of the reasons I think people still hate Five Finger Death Punch. I don't necessarily think people judge the band on its own musical merits, but more so the context surrounding the band. Especially considering the majority of Five Finger Death Punch's audience are conservative right-wing dude bros who, might have been bullies in a past life, since a lot of the complaints or a lot of the people I saw who put F8 on their worst of list were highlighting the band's fan base as opposed to the music itself. I don't like nor care about Five Finger Death Punch enough to just defend them from the many stupid things they've done, both professionally and in their personal lives. But regardless, I do think if I'm going to separate context from a band, that this is a very good record. If a more obscure band released the same album, I think it would be getting much more critical praise, and might even be getting recognition for bringing metal into a mainstream light. But because it's Five Finger Death Punch, a lot of that gets underplayed. Regardless, I do think that's unfortunate. I know they've got a new guitarist in the band, Andy James, if I'm not mistaken. So, with 2 new members, maybe we could see a different side of Five Finger Death Punch this decade, a more artistic side, a more straightforward side, well, I'm sorry, excuse me, a more thought-provoking side as opposed to their more surface level and straightforward past albums. However, if you guys are going to talk about politics, maybe do it a little more gracefully and a little less obnoxiously. You might be able to win over some fans, or maybe even hit some more people in the center if you don't make something as obnoxious as that Living the Dream video again. And yeah, that's it for Five Finger Death Punch. Okay, so I did mention the top 4 records they would have a little bit of a star next to them compared to everything else. And again, I stand by my own words that all of these albums are great and you should check out all of them. But the reason these albums are higher, or the reason I'm making a notable difference for these records, is because all of these records share the common trait of getting more interesting with each subsequent listen. And that's not to say the past albums I mentioned got boring or I got tired of them after one listen. That's more so to say that these 4 records, I discovered something new that I didn't hear upon first listen, or second listen, or third listen. It was like a very good book or an amazing film, where upon revisiting it each time, I found something I didn't see before. And these records are significant, and I did put a little star next to them, because if I had to assume what would be in my best of the decade list, I'm pretty sure I might see these records there. Number 1 is definitely going to be in the top 10. It could even be the number 1 album of the decade. But the other 3, yeah, maybe like a top 25 or a top 20. Maybe even a top 10, depending on how the record goes. So check back with me in 2029. Without further ado, here are 4 records that I think were particularly revolutionary, boundary pushing, and interesting for their respective genres. Rounding out our list at number 4 is what is easily the most innovative rock album of 2020, and that is Poppy with I Disagree. So I've been keeping up with Poppy for a while now, at least 2 years. I remember she's a particularly unique artist to me because what inspired me to check out her music was the cover art for Am I a Girl? I thought it was just so disturbing and mysterious that I had to see what the music on this record sounded like, if it was as captivating as its cover art. I enjoyed the record. It was definitely a new experience for me, seeing as that type of music wasn't something I was ever really exposed to before. But I made a mental note of her to check her out. And I did purchase Am I a Girl? I think if an artist does that, especially a new artist or an obscure artist, you should buy their album just to incentivize them continuing on. That way, 10 years from now, we're asking ourselves, why the hell didn't Poppy take off? Well, she didn't take off because you didn't buy the record. I Disagree is definitely one of the more... You're going to have to edit that. So I Disagree is definitely an improvement on her past album, in my opinion. I think it takes a lot of the best aspects of Am I a Girl and expands upon them tremendously. And the best example of this is just how it blends metal with pop music. So I mentioned earlier how My Name is Dark by Grimes was like Madonna meets Nine Inch Nails. Well, the entirety of I Disagree can best be summed up as Marilyn Manson meets Britney Spears. One of the better songs demonstrating this would be Concrete, which explores multiple genres in one song, like from nu metal to J-pop to regular pop, all in one go, and at no point does it feel overwhelming. It's like a very good burger that has so many flavors that just come at you at once, but instead of feeling overwhelming or disgusting, you get to savor each thing. It's like you recognize it all at its own pace. Fill the Crown might be the best example as far as what I said about Marilyn Manson meets Britney Spears, especially since whoever is singing on that song sounds very much like Marilyn Manson. Sit Stay is another really cool song. It goes from this intense Powerman 5000-esque electronic beat to a more synthetic and ambient noise, more lounge and laid back. It's a nice juxtaposition, and I enjoy it very much. What might be the best song on the album, and definitely my favorite song on the album, is Don't Go Outside. So this record came out in January, right before everything blew up regarding the whole, And what's neat is it's just that title, Don't Go Outside. It's foreboding, it's ominous, because you know what's coming next with hindsight, And Don't Go Outside is also unique because it's a reprise of 3 of the biggest songs on the album: Concrete, Fill the Crown, and I want to say I Disagree. It's kind of skipping me at the moment, but it's a very cool track, and it pretty much sums up everything in one song. Another one of my favorite songs is definitely Blood Money. It incorporates this really intense and heavy electronic breakdown that I'm actually surprised Korn didn't try to do when they explored dubstep. This is something I would expect from a band like Korn, but I got it from this wholesome young woman instead. And really, that's a good selling point of this record. I know Loudwire, they referred to it as the album of the year, and it's not hard to see why, because this is definitely the most unique album to come out in 2020. I know a lot of people were pretty pissed off that Loudwire did that, but if I had to pick any one record that was absolutely evolving rock and pushing rock to new boundaries, it would be I Disagree. That's kind of funny. It's called I Disagree, and everybody's going to say, I disagree to me saying that. But yeah, pretty much everything you'd want from a rock album is in this record. It's dark, it's heavy, it's creepy, it's mean, it's intense. I just see no reason why you can't enjoy this record, especially if you love rock music. If you truly love rock music, regardless of era, like if you enjoy everything from Pink Floyd to, I don't know, Korn, then this is a record that I think will be very important in the grand scheme of time. Maybe we'll come back to this review in like 10 years and see how well that statement has aged. But yeah, I think you'd be a cultural layman to miss out on this record. Especially when a lot of the reasons I saw rock fans dismissing this album for can best be summed up as, ugh, but a girl made that record. Cooties. This is a great album and you should check it out. Hey guys, I'm re-recording my review on this album because I think the original came out very choppy. First time on camera, what can you do? Anyway, at our number 3 spot, we have Godzillionaire with Negative Balance. So, I've been keeping up with Godzillionaire for about 2 years at this point. I was exposed to them through my discovery of Paw, which is the grunge band formerly fronted by lead singer Mark Hennessy. However, Godzillionaire has been very distinct from Paw in that it explores further aspects of alternative music beyond the heavily southern punk hybrid that was Paw's sound. Godzillionaire's debut Small Change was a spacey EP showing off Hennessy's range as well as the musical knowledge of the other members of Godzillionaire. The Great Depression elaborates on this versatility, being a melancholic EP that might be the darkest EP released by a grunge-related band since Jar of Flies by Alice in Chains. Needless to say, I was very excited for the first full-length album to be released by Godzillionaire, and I'm happy to say Negative Balance met my expectations in every way. Bankrupt, Naked, and Void is probably the song which represents Godzillionaire the most, as it has the genre-fusing sound referenced on the aforementioned EPs. The song beginning as an electronic-tinged experimental song and later exploding into a punk-heavy rock crescendo. 64 Palms is probably my favorite song as it closes out the album in a similar way, beginning as an acoustic song before jumping into a symphony of hard rock. I think what might be my favorite thing about Negative Balance is its inadvertent similarities to Poppy's I Disagree. Both albums definitely encapsulate the sinister cloud that hung over most of 2020. Additionally, both albums end on disturbing coincidences, with Poppy's Don't Go Outside being a foreboding prediction of quarantine, and Negative Balance ending with Exit Aisle Reprise, a song giving instructions as to how to put on a mask. This almost attaches a historic albatross to each album, and this is especially notable as both songs were recorded long before the events of 2020 would transpire. This gives Negative Balance and I Disagree a yin and yang vibe with each other, especially seeing as Negative Balance is the longest album on this list, and I Disagree is the shortest. But honestly, once I made this connection between the two albums, I felt like the guy who discovered peanut butter and chocolate. Negative Balance is fantastic on its own, however, I feel as though I have a deeper appreciation for it now, upon pairing it with Poppy's album. I lastly want to address my earlier statement about the top 4 records getting more interesting with repeated listens. Negative Balance captures this vibe more than any other record on this list. I can best surmise Negative Balance as a fantastic book that enlightens you upon rereading, or as a cinematic masterpiece where you see the work put into it by the director, cast, and crew with each subsequent view. If you haven't been excited by a hard rock album in recent memory, then you should absolutely listen to Negative Balance. You won't regret it. And at the second spot on our list, we have Lola Marsh with Someday Tomorrow Maybe. So, I've been following Lola Marsh for about 5 years already, maybe 6. No, definitely 5. I first heard Sirens at the tail end of 2015. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of what drew me to Lola Marsh's sound was that initially it did kind of come off as Israel's answer to Lana Del Rey. I thought Remember Roses was a pretty good album. I really liked the ambitious tracks from that record, like She's a Rainbow, Sirens, of course, Bluebirds, another example, and Morning Bell. For the most part, I thought it was a perfectly good alternative record. It didn't really leave me feeling anything besides that sentence I just said. However, Someday Tomorrow maybe takes all the things I liked about Remember Roses and expands upon them tremendously. Seeing as the majority of this album really comes off like they're trying to build off on Sirens and She's a Rainbow with these explosive choruses and really ambitious, heavy, by alternative standards sound. Echoes is definitely the first example. It's this really intense Western-esque alternative song. I really do think the general sound of this album is represented in its cover artwork. When you're listening to this record, you feel like you're on that plane with Lola Marsh going on adventures and exploring the world. I do really like a lot of the interludes here too, especially the final interlude. Well, it's not even really an interlude, it's a reprise of Echoes. But I do think they put more artistic thought into this album than they did with Remember Roses. And that's kind of satisfying to see, because we're watching a band get more comfortable in its own skin to where they're willing to take more artistic chances as they delve into their career. However, one thing I do want to highlight about this record that I think deserves more recognition in regards to Lola Marsh as an artist is the fact that English is Yel Shoshana Cohen, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, is her second language. To me, that is absolutely mind-blowing. Like, the closest I know to a second language is Spanish. And in no way, shape, or form am I even on the level of being as fluent as she is. And no song better represents this than In Your Eyes. So In Your Eyes is a song of basically telling a story, an entire story from her childhood, and applying it to her adult life. The imagery she provides, the vividness, is just so real that I have to recognize this just from a linguistic perspective. And that might be one of my favorite aspects of this record is English is this woman's second language. And she speaks it more elegantly, beautifully, and fluently than most Americans. So on that level alone, it's pretty clear to see she's talented. But even if you're not looking at the record from that perspective, as an alternative album, it's interesting, it's groundbreaking, and it's turning enough to where you'll still get a lot out of it, no matter what you're looking for. I think if you're somebody who does like Lana Del Rey, you should check this out, because musically it is very different, but vocally she does have a lot of similarities to her, and she demonstrates her vocals in a way that I think maybe no one's really ever heard before, considering how obscure this band is. So yeah, check it out. And at our number one pick for Best Album of 2020, we have Perdida by Stone Temple Pilots. Yeah, I guess to those of you who know me, this is a pretty obvious pick, considering Stone Temple Pilots is my favorite band. But even with that in mind, or even disregarding that, I do think this album deserves to be regarded as the best record of 2020. It's definitely not as groundbreaking as I Disagree, Negative Balance, or Someday Tomorrow Maybe, being that it's really just an acoustic album. And as we all know, especially as rock fans, there's nothing entirely new about acoustic albums. In fact, some bands like Daze of the New have made entire careers out of being acoustic. But regardless, this record is just so wholesome and beautiful that I think it absolutely should be in the best album of 2020, if for nothing else, with how human it feels. So a general theme on this album is loss. And as you'll remember in my intro to this video, people experienced tremendous loss in 2020. I experienced tremendous loss in 2020, which made this record very easy to identify with. We mentioned Gray Days earlier. What is my favorite and what I think is the best song on the album is I Didn't Know the Time, which is actually a tribute from Jeff Goot to Chester Bennington. This song is literally about Chester Bennington. And this song lyrically is just pretty much the definitive form of sympathy and solidarity. Seeing as this record is doing everything it can to stress that it can't identify with Chester Bennington's pain, but extending a helping hand in terms of how much pain he must have felt, extending the best sympathies he can. Years is probably my second favorite song on the album. It's about Robert DeLeo's divorce. And this is the first time Rob has ever sung lead vocals, not only in Stone Temple Pilots, but in any of the bands he's been in. And I really hope we get more of that because he has a very lovely voice, a very lounge jazz type singer voice. But what I like so much about Years is that despite being about a divorce, it's not spiteful or hateful at all. It's really a sad reflection on how a marriage just gradually, disappears, how love doesn't always last forever, and you could be in your 50s and a divorce can just hit you out of nowhere. You Found Yourself While Losing Your Heart is definitely the most breakup song on the album. And as someone who went through a breakup in 2020, it's probably one of the songs I identified with most on the album. And I do think this captures a lot of those post-breakup feelings very well. That's even in the title, You Found Yourself While Losing Your Heart. Like, there's no pain like a breakup. And
Your wife divorced you.
in those moments where you're single, when you used to be with somebody all the time, you can discover a lot about yourself because you really have to learn to be alone again, and that's absolutely reflected in the song. Sunburst is also a very beautiful track, a very hopeful track, and it ties the album in very well because Fare Thee Well is is a song saying goodbye. It's a song about making peace as someone gradually disappears from your life. And Sunburst is about a new beginning. It's about turning over a new leaf. In many ways, this is probably the definitive breakup album, actually. Yet, despite being about relationships and about being about loss predominantly, at no point does the record really feel sad. The closest thing to a sad track would be the title track, Perdida. Despite that, I still think it's very pretty. Musically, it reminds me a lot of that movie Coco. And I like it. I think it's a very wholesome song despite its pretty sad undertones or overtones. It's the most explicitly sad song. I Once Sat at Your Table is pretty cool. It reminds me a lot of Once Upon a Tribe by Dean DeLeo. So if you've never heard that song, you should listen to it. Especially since Once Upon a Tribe feels like it could have been on Perdida. It kind of feels like a lost Perdida track. I think the last time a record made me feel the way Perdida does was in 2012 when I heard Mad Seasons Above for the first time. I watched a documentary about George Harrison, and at one point he's in India speaking with his guru, and his guru tells him music is a form of communication with spirits. So depending on what type of music you're listening to, you could be conversing with angels or demons. And this song absolutely encapsulates that phrase to me as far as speaking with angels. If you listen to nothing else on this list, please listen to this record because I really do think your life will be improved by it. So if you're going to work, listen to the first half on the way over and the second half on the way back. Especially if you're going through a very difficult time, such as the loss of a friendship, the loss of a relationship, the death of a family member, the death of a pet, just any sort of trauma you could be going through. I think this record will capture those feelings in a way that's healing and moving forward. And that's why I think Perdida is the best album of 2020. And those are 9 great albums of 2020. I hope you have heard these albums, but if you haven't, that makes me hopeful too, because I love introducing people to music they might love. What were your favorite albums of 2020? Did I pick any albums that were on your favorites? Did I miss any albums that were on your favorites that you'd like for me to talk about? Let me know down in the comment section below, and maybe we'll revisit that in a future video. So be calm, be cool, be collected, and see you later.